My first Nintendo handhelds were the Game Boy Advance and the DS. To be honest, I didn't really have any normal video games. Is that what I should call? I'm trying to say that I had licensed games, basically. I was a dumb kid. I basically got whatever had SpongeBob or Lego in the title. Not to say these were bad games, but I missed out on a lot of the good stuff is what I'm trying to say. I didn't play the Zelda games. I didn't play the Pokemon games. I didn't play the Metroid games. It wasn't until I got a 3DS that I started to really take things seriously when it came to video games. I started playing the big names. I got stuff with oomph in them. For today's video, I wanted to go over this list that I found dating all the way back from 2016. It was like 8 years ago, I think. I basically made this list, and at the time, these were like my top 10 favorite games on 3DS. This was during an era where everybody was making top 10 lists and all that. I wanted to make a video, and well, I guess I'm making it now. I wanted to replay these games, but unfortunately I sold my 3DS some time ago. I must have needed money or something, but I do regret doing that. So this is really just going to be a more of a trip down memory lane. Starting now. Hyrule Warriors Legends. This one wasn't too popular at the time, I'm not gonna lie. So, Hyrule Warriors Legends was a port of the Wii U game Hyrule Warriors. How do you put a home console game on a handheld device? You make it look like garbage! This is what the game looks like on Wii U. This is what the game looks like on 3DS. Yeah, God of War's got nothing on this, guys. Okay, so why did young me put this on the list? Even though it had graphics that were on par with the Nintendo 64 Zelda games, Hyrule Warriors still had the highly addictive one-man army gameplay that made Warriors games so special. If you haven't played a Warriors game before, in a nutshell, they're these type of games that are power fantasies. You fight thousands of dudes that might as well be made out of cardboard. I would spend hundreds of hours whenever I had the time, basically. Sneak it in while a teacher was talking, playing over the weekend. I would spend hundreds of hours just completing objectives, capturing keeps. If the world was a Coca-Cola bottle, I was a 10,000 degree knife just chopping it. It might look like it was made out of Play-Doh, but Hyrule Warriors played like a dream. Assuming you didn't have an older model 3DS. In that case, it played like someone made a PowerPoint presentation with a bunch of screenshots and was just pressing the next slide button. Pokemon Sun. With the 3DS being my introduction to big titles, my first Pokemon game was Pokemon Y. I don't want to say this is a series where if you play one, you play them all, but I will say that this is a series where if you play one, it does give you a general gist of what some of the other games are like, even if they're not exactly the same. A big reason there's so many friggin' Pokemon games is just because of how addicting it is to capture and collect the Pokemon themselves. I love the designs, both goofy and the cool ones, and I also think that as humans we have this secret urge to just be hoarders and collect as much of a thing as possible. Now, the reason I must have picked Pokemon Sun specifically is because I liked a lot of the quality of life updates they added in comparison to the previous ones. They made it so that you can use ride Pokemons if you wanted to travel around the island, instead of just using one of your existing Pokemon and forcing them to learn a move like Fly or Swim, required to progress the story. Actually, speaking of the story, I remember it being pretty engaging. A lot of the Pokemon stories aren't really the best, but I remember a few characters that I really liked in Sun specifically. And before you ask, I did not get Ultra Sun or Ultra Moon. At the time, I felt like I was getting ripped off. I mean, come on, who sells roughly the same game twice, but oh, this time it's got extra content? DLC was a thing at the time, too.
You could have just made the extra content DLC. I don't see why you needed to rip off your...
Professor Layton, Miracle Mask. While most video games have a focus on delivering action, the Professor Layton series aims to have a calmer and more casual approach. Now, a typical Professor Layton game usually follows the titular professor and his assistant Luke investigating a mystery in a visual novel style while also solving puzzles and brain teasers. I think I'm in the minority of Layton fans when it comes to this, but while I do love solving the puzzles in the games, it was always the stories that drew me in, my favorite of which being Miracle Mask. Something I personally love about the Professor, but it's understandably become a common complaint with some people. He's often seen as being too perfect. At the end of every game, he usually perfectly deduces what's going on, like, oh, it was this culprit who did this because there was a dog or something. Point is, he's seen as being too perfect by a lot of people. With Miracle Mask having a story split between the past and the future, we get to see a much younger and more relatable Professor, as we're shown a story that leads to a tragic incident involving one of his best friends, an event that would eventually shape him into the person that he is now. This is why Miracle Mask was, and still is, my favorite of the Layton games. It shows us a much more vulnerable side to the Professor that we hardly ever see in the other entries. Here's to hoping we get a massive collection or something on Switch at some point, because man, I'm really starting to miss these games. Persona Q, Shadow of the Labyrinth. Funny story about this one. My parents had no idea it was an M-rated game because of the cutesy chibi art style, so I was able to get it for Christmas no problems. Sorry guys. Anyways, this is yet another great example of a classic turn-based RPG on 3DS. So, the story with this one is that the main casts of the games Persona 3 and 4 are thrust into an alternate dimension or whatever's going on, and basically they need to work together in order to brave the different labyrinth and discover the truth behind this nefarious world that they're in all of a sudden. So, having never played the Persona games these were based on, I fortunately didn't get too confused when it came to the story. I mean, if anything, I felt this game kind of served as a great introduction to the series. During my playthrough, I actually took the time to watch the different anime adaptations for Persona 3 and Persona 4. I just loved the characters that much. The voice acting behind them, especially, was phenomenal. Moving on to the gameplay itself, I felt that it was very unique compared to most other turn-based RPGs because as you're going through the labyrinth, you're using the bottom screen of the DS to make a map. You get to make a note of where you're at, you get to make a note of a treasure chest that you might not have access to, or if there's a special enemy, things like that that just made you feel like you were making progress even if you didn't get any special items during your run. Something else worth mentioning is that this game did get a sequel in Persona Q2, but I never got the chance to try it. I don't have a specific reason, I just never got it for some reason. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS. Yeah, you can't go wrong with a fighting game like Smash. Everyone was playing this game when it came out. It didn't matter if you were typically the quiet one or not. I feel like this game forced everyone to socialize because it was just that fun. I usually stick with single-player games, but you bet I had Smash Brothers. Everybody in my high school had Smash Brothers. Pretty much every hangout I went to in 2014, every time I'd meet up with my buddies during lunch, it was just dominated by Smash Brothers. Certainly helped that the Wii U version allowed you to use your 3DS as a controller too. Playing the game was only half the fun though. Don't even get me started with the discussions and the theories and the fake leaks of who or who wouldn't get in as a DLC fighter. It was never going to happen, but I always hoped for either Professor Layton or an indie character like Shovel Knight or Shantae. At that point in my life, Smash was like the ultimate social game for me. Just one of those rare cases where your experience transcends from the small screen and into real life in a way that I doubt will ever happen again in my current adult life. Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. It's crazy to think that Awakening was originally going to be the final game in the Fire Emblem series, given how much of a Nintendo staple that series has currently become. Like most people, the 3DS games were my starting point with these tactical RPGs. You've got your playable characters in the form of units, and besides using them in battle, you can also socialize with them via support conversations. Out of all the main series games that are on 3DS, Fire Emblem Echoes, that was mainly my favorite due to the higher production values that it had compared to the previous games that came before it. It was the first title on the system to have a story that was fully voice acted. This allowed the characters to feel like they were really coming to life. Now, in terms of the story itself, I remember it being about on par with Awakening, which is to say, it was a really good story. Just the addition of voice acting just kind of helped engage me more with it than I normally would. I also remember really liking those 3D sections where you would explore dungeons in third person. Yeah, I don't remember it too well, but I think I liked it. I mean, the battles in the game were still turn-based, but you sure could show a bunch of wooden boxes who's boss. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. I do love me a good Metroidvania, which is funny to say because at this point in time I had actually never played a Metroid or a Castlevania. Metroidvanias are games that have you explore these massive worlds for important progression items, but in a 2D space. They're basically open world side-scrollers. My introduction to this genre came primarily from indie games like Cave Story and, as you can guess, Shantae. Now, the first Shantae on Game Boy Color is a decent and very graphically impressive experience for the type of system that it came out on. Its sequel, Risky's Revenge, it was just okay. It felt like they didn't really finish the game. You only had 2 dungeons to explore, which for a Metroidvania, that's a very small amount of dungeons. I didn't really fall in love with the series until I played Pirate's Curse, because that game is a masterpiece of a Metroidvania. A lot of it comes down to the movement of it. In the other games, Shantae relied on these animal transformations. She activated them by performing certain dance moves. But in Pirate's Curse, she lost her magical abilities in the previous games, so now she has to rely on these things called pirate tools, and they're pretty instantaneous because each one you press with like a different button on your system. And because of how instantaneous it is to use these pirate tools, you're able to achieve like this level of movement and flow that you honestly could never do with the animal transformations. Ever since Pirate's Curse, I've played every Shantae game before and after, but since a lot of the future ones return to using the animal forms, I feel like they haven't quite reached that same level of smoothness and quickness that they had with Pirate's Curse, so I'm really hoping that they're able to get back to that somehow. The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Alright, we are at the top 3 now. It should probably come as no surprise that another Zelda game is on here. My very first one, to be clear. I honestly didn't have any expectations when I first bought this game. I mean, I knew Zelda games were supposed to be good, but dang, this was a fun time. I'm starting to realize that I really like games with exploration aspects, since exploring both the Kingdom of Hyrule and its underworld counterpart, Lorule, made me feel like a genius every time I solved a puzzle or completed a dungeon. This game also made me realize just how high the production values of Nintendo first-party games were. Not the spin-offs like Hyrule Warriors, but like the first-party games, compared to other games on 3DS, because not only did the cartoony visuals and art style bring this game to life, but I could have sworn that the music was done by a live orchestra at times. Apparently it wasn't, but I'm surprised, because it just sounds that good. Going through all these games is just making me super nostalgic. You know, I still haven't played the new Link's Awakening yet, but honestly, I kind of want to get it now, because I just really miss A Link Between Worlds. Shovel Knight. Oh yeah, I remember Shovel Knight. It used to be a really big deal. This game was like the poster child for classic retro throwback games. Not only does it emulate that classic NES style very closely with its visuals, but it's a challenging and super well designed experience as well. It takes a lot of the tropes from classic NES games, like a well-detailed world map, non-linear progression with the bosses you face, and the classic story of a hero saving the damsel in distress. With a twist. And on top of being a good game, they made like 3 different content packs for free! Free! You guys have to understand, Shovel Knight was the indie darling of the day. Don't even get me started with all the cameos you would get in other games either. Blaster Master Zero, Blade Strangers, this dude was everywhere. And for our honorable mention, I'd like to talk about the indie dev Inti Creates. Now, the list I found doesn't have an honorable mention on it. This is just future Kingpin who wants to add Inti Creates here because I really loved playing their games when the 3DS was late in its life. They used to develop a few of the modern Mega Man games on other systems, but eventually they'd go on to make games independently. A lot of really cool and addictive side-scrollers like Azure Striker Gunvolt, Blaster Master Zero, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, and Mighty Gunvolt Burst. That one in particular was like the closest we ever got to like a 3DS version of Mighty Number 9. But anyways, the best part about Inti Creates, which I can't say for a lot of the games on this list, all of their titles that I just mentioned have Switch versions, so I really recommend that you guys check those out if you want more. Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. A game so powerful, you needed to get a new 3DS if you really wanted to play it. And I don't mean like, yeah, you gotta get a new set. No, it's a new, it's on the title, it's a new Nintendo 3DS. Wasn't I talking about a video game? Oh yeah, Xenoblade. This game was so massive, so overwhelmingly breathtaking that I couldn't even believe I was playing this on a 3DS, that it was even on a handheld to begin with. Now, Xenoblade Chronicles is an action RPG that originally debuted on the Wii. On the Wii. For whatever reason, Nintendo really said, yeah, let's put this on the 3DS. The opening alone was just, man, it was just so cinematic. Like, you had this war with the robots, and then there's this dude, and the one British guy is just like, yeah, we can totally take these dudes. And then this other guy was like, oh, we're gonna die. And then the screen pans out, and you see these dudes living in robots, and game big. The point I'm trying to make is that game big. Years later, we follow Shulk and his friends as they unknowingly embark on an adventure of epic proportions. I know I've said it a billion times already, but this game is so huge. It's huge. It's so huge that it took me a whole summer to beat it. I'm not kidding. Like, I started, like, my birthday is like around like May-ish, and I got this game for my birthday, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna start the game. I started the game, and then after I started the game, I finished the game, and summer, there was like 2 weeks, there was like 1 week left of summer. It took me that long to beat it. The closest thing I could say as a downside would probably be its visuals, but I mean, come on. They basically had a 10-meat platter, just whole meal, and tried to like stuff it into a burrito. It doesn't look pretty, but man, does it taste good. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty tired. I know things got super weird with that number one pick, but I hope you still enjoyed the video. Also, I'm sorry if you were hoping for a list that focused more on exclusive 3DS titles rather than ports and remakes. When I first made this list, I was just trying to focus on games that I played for the first time. Before I go, I just want to quickly say that out of all the entries on the list, Hyrule Warriors, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, Shovel Knight, and Xenoblade Chronicles are currently the only 4 that have modern Switch ports if you're interested in playing those titles. Again, hope you enjoyed the video. A new Nintendo 3DS!
Not the old one.